Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar, and in this video we're going to continue my long in-depth army series on the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and this will be part 5, and what we're going to look at in this video is going to be the Behemoths, so the monsters, and also the artillery of the Ossiarch Bonereapers. So simply this is just going to be 2 units we're going to look at, which is going to be the Gothizzar Harvester and also the Mortek Crawler, which is the catapult everybody loves in Age of Sigmar. So what I will just say as well, if you want to find out more information on the Ossiarch Bonereapers, as this is part 5 of my series, I have already done the previous parts where we covered the lore for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, the allegiance abilities, the sub-allegiances, the main units and the heroes. So if you want to find out information on that, go please check out my series for Ossiarch Bonereapers. You'll find my homepage for Age of Nagash, or when you get to the end of this video you will find it as a suggested thing to watch. There'll be a playlist of my Ossiarch Bonereapers. So what we're going to do in this video, like I said, we're going to go over the Gothizzar Harvester and we'll go over the Mortek Crawler. I'll also talk about a little bit of the lore for the Gothizzar Harvester and the Mortek Crawler as well, as that's something what I'm pretty sure most people who watch my videos come to expect, is that I don't just focus on the rules. Yes, this channel is like match play focused, because you can play as narratively as you want, but what I do like to do if you are playing match players, I do like to talk about the lore, the story of the units and models involved in this wonderful game that we play, because a lot of the time it's the stories that make me choose what models I want to buy, as well as the models looking pretty damn cool. So the last thing I just want to say before we actually get straight into this video is going to be a massive shout out to my patrons and my YouTube members, who because of these people I am able to continue making content for you guys to try and help you get into Age of Sigmar and to continue your Age of Sigmar journey. So to start with, we're going to say a massive thank you to my Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons, which is going to be Stuart F and Filq, which you guys know that's the top tier of support you can give here. Age of Nagash, you're really helping keeping the channel going. I don't know what to say apart from thank you very kindly for your very nice donation towards the channel. And then we've got my Morgasts, which is Bleed Red, who's been a Morgast for a long time. Thank you for the continued support, it really does help. And then my Vampires, who have been here for a long time as well. It's going to be Mir, Martin S, Rouse321, David A, Ronni H, SpareBear, Christopher H, Northdrop and Nathan F. Thank you so much for the continued support. It doesn't go unnoticed and it really does go towards keeping the channel going. And then my Necromancers, which is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, WolfNick, Michal W, Quad, Cranky Wombat, Christopher C, Christopher F, James S, Robin S, Steve T, James T, Patrick F and JJ. Thank you all for your continued support, and if everyone who enjoys this content, if you can say thank you to these guys as well, as they really do deserve it. And if anyone would like to become one of these beautiful people, you'll find a join button next to the subscribe button here on YouTube, will allow you to become a member in Age of Nagash, or you'll find a link to my Patreon at the top of the description down below, which you can click as well and you can become a patron. But we'll get to all the details of that at the end of the video, because for right now we are going to start with the Gothizzar Harvester, which is a macabre monstrosity from the darkest of nightmares. The Gothizzar Harvester existence makes sense only to the Ossiarch that created it. The creature is a murderous juggernaut of bone and metal that can smash through a shield wall without breaking a stride, but also a collector of the dead. Its role is to provide as well as to destroy. Massive, lumbering and surrounded by the terrible energies of death. The Gothizzar Harvester is a many-limbed beast made to tear through infantry formations and then collects their remains for later use. It is often used as a line breaker by the commanders of the Ossiarch military, who see it in terms of might more than resource. Yet the Harvester is so infused with deathly energy, so loaded with raw material for the creation of new Ossiarches, that it forms a nexus of the Mortisan's art. As such, these creatures are in great demand within the Ossiarch cohorts. Where they walk, victory usually follows. So that's the lore of a Gothizzar Harvester, which is a long way to describe a skeletal crocodile monstrosity with a corpse skull on its back and a literal skeleton for its penis. But there we are. And I would say that It's one of the models that may be a little bit off the Ossiarch Bonereapers when I first saw them. I've warmed up to the Ossiarch Bonereapers now, and I really do like them. Obviously, I'm collecting them, and I have a lot of experience playing with them, like I said. But the Gothizzar Harvester was a little bit like stumpy legs. It's got a skeleton for a penis, and it just felt a bit too weird. Like, I understand there's loads of arms and stuff on it because they're, you know, trying to collect bits of bone and obviously other materials and put them into the corpse cart, like I say, that's on its back. And I get that, but why did they have to give the one in his groin a face? Why couldn't it just be arms? Like, it just seemed a bit funny, but at first I'd say like I didn't like it, but I've warmed to it now. Is it my favourite model in the whole collection? No, but I'd say the upper portion of the body, so take its groin away and its legs, I really do like. I think it looks awesome. Apart from the obvious flaws like I've mentioned. But anyway, enough about my personal preferences and what I like about this model. Let's actually go in to talk about what it's like on a tabletop. So, it is a behemoth, like I stated in this video, we are looking at behemoths, and it is going to cost you 200 points. So it does fit into the section of the Ossiarch Bonereapers where basically most of the units in this army could be broken down to units that cost around 130 points to units that cost 180 to 200 points. And this is 200 points. So it's in competition with a lot of other stuff you could have in your army. So let's see if we think it's actually going to be worth it. Its description is, a Gothizzar Harvester is a single model armed with one of the following weapon options: Soul Crusher bludgeons, ossified hooves and tail, and death head maw. Or the other option is a Soul Cleaver sickles, ossified hooves and tail, and death head maw. So basically what you can see there is the two options you actually have is, do you have the Soul Crusher bludgeons or do you go for the Soul Cleaver sickles? I mean, either way, the opponent's souls are going to be crushed by the end of it. So going on to its wheel stats, it's got a 6-inch movement, which again obviously can be made to 9 inches with the +3 movement from the Ossiarch Bonereaper command ability. It's got a 4+ save, it's got bravery 10, and it's got 10 wounds. So it's got a nice amount of wounds. However, does come with a damage table, annoyingly. Going on to the missile weapons, we have the Death's Head Maw, which has got a range which starts off at 16, but will get weaker the more damage it takes, which is going to be 4 attacks, freeze and freeze, -1 rend, and 1 damage. So what I'd say about this, bear in mind you're playing a death army, which, not talking about the Mortek Crawler right now, take that thing aside, but we'll talk about that in a moment. In a death army, you traditionally don't have much shooting. So to be honest, a 16-inch range shooting attack where you could go, it's not going to kill like a hero outright or anything else. No, but it could chip a couple of wounds off. It could be useful. It's a not bad shooting attack in a death army. Is it going to be the main point of this model? Absolutely not. But, you know, you might as well have it than not have it. Especially if this guy could maybe not always be on the line, because you could have him basically where he needs to be next to Mortek Guard as an example. So you're not just charging this guy in all the time. He's going to be in position where it's fixed. So the fact that he has a range attack is nice. And then going on to the melee weapons. So the Soul Cleaver sickles first. It's a 1-inch range. It starts with 6 attacks. It hits on a 3, it wounds on a 3, it's -2 rend and 2 damage. So there we go. But if I just go down to the abilities now, so we know what it says, the Soul Cleaver Sickles is add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with the Soul Cleaver Sickles if the target unit has 5 or more models. So against hordes, or not even really against hordes, just units that start at minimum 5, because you'll find like below that minimum 2, minimum 3 maybe, but they're quite rare. You know, you're talking about like Eels or I don't know, Baron Guard or Dracoffs or those sort of very small unit size. So 5 or more should be more than reasonable to find on the battlefield. So then you're hitting on 2s, which is nice. So it's going to make it that much more reliable, and you're going to be rerolling 1s as well if you've got the Soul Mason spell off on you, like Soul Guide, I believe it's called, we looked at in the last video. What I would say though is there's multiple ways in Ossiarch Bonereapers to get pluses to hit. So if it was +1 to wound, could definitely see that being better. But you know, it's good, you'll take it, but there are other ways to get the +1 to hit, especially when this is in competition, right? Because the sickles are in competition with the bludgeons. So the Soul Crusher bludgeons, which is a 1-inch range, it has 6 attacks to start. Again, it does get weaker, like the sickles, and then it's got freeze to hit, freeze to wound, -2 rend, and 2 damage. So on paper, they're exactly the same when you look at them. They haven't got, one hasn't got a better range than the other one. They start with the same amount of attacks, both hit on freeze, both wound on freeze, both -2 rend, and both 2 damage. Exactly the same, so it's the abilities where they come in. So you get the +1 to hit with the sickles. However, the Soul Crusher bludgeons, and this is why I prefer them, their ability is, if the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with Soul Crusher bludgeons is a 6, that attack inflicts 2 mortal wounds on the target and the attack sequence ends. Do not make a wound or save roll. So this is really, really nice, because your Ossiarch Bonereaper army, it's not the army that's got the least amount of ways to do mortal wounds to the enemy, but it certainly isn't the best army at doing mortal wounds to the enemy. You're going to have to go quite specific to find your mortal wound output. So this is one of them, and it's definitely nice to have. Like, I had one of these when I played against a heavy Ishlan Guard army from the INF Deepkin, and the guy, I think a lot of the time the Ishlan Guard were on like a 2-up save or a 3-up save, and a lot of the time they were re-rolling ones from way out defense and stuff, and I just couldn't break through because it's unrendable, their save. So the mortal wounds from this guy, I believe, like, it didn't really add much to the fight, but you know, it killed like 1 or 2 eels, but it did help out, and I just didn't have that ability anywhere else in my army, so that's definitely better. Also, you know, there are other ways to get pluses to hit, like I've already mentioned, so I do definitely prefer the Soul Crusher bludgeons. If you were to ask me which one do I think looks cooler, definitely the sickles. I think that definitely looks cooler, and it's a lot more like Egyptian-like and stuff, those blades. But the bludgeons are better in the game, in my honest opinion. So then going on to the ossified hooves and tails. This is a 2-inch range, 4 attacks, 3s to hit. It's 2s to wound to start, so that's very nice. And then -1 rend, 2 damage. So that is a nice secondary attack. I could definitely have seen this being like, before I ever read this, just like a 1 damage attack or something. So the 2 damage there is nice. Something also to mention with the Gothizzar Harvester, while we're talking about its combat output before we go into its other purpose, is that people have taken this in Petrified Elite, because then you can give it an extra -1 rend. So before you know it, your ossified hooves and tails, which is your least melee attack, is now -2 rend, and then your Soul Crusher bludgeons are -3 rend, or your Soul Cleaver sickles are -3 rend as well. And bear in mind how good you are at hitting and wounding with this thing, you know, because it's very hard to automatically be wounded on 2s as an example. That -3 rend, most enemies won't be able to do much about it, and even if they can, they're saving on 6s. So this thing is very nice, rather than it just being purely a support piece, which we're about to go into when we look at its ability Bone Harvest. This can also not just handle itself in combat, it can be used as a sledgehammer. Not that it's going to break, like, I think in the lore that I read, it said, it will shatter any shield wall the enemy has. I mean, like, it'll give it a go, but, you know, it's going to struggle against an entire enemy army. But especially how you're going to run this guy with Mortek Guard, backing him up. This guy is probably going to be how I've used him, in the middle of 2 blocks of like 40 Mortek Guard, or maybe in the middle of 2 blocks of 20 Mortek Guard as an example. Because he's in the middle, he has to stay there to heal, which will, like I say, I'll read that in a second. But what that means is that the enemy can't really throw too much into him to try and attack him unless they go straight for the middle. So they're probably going to have to split their attacks into him. He'll be able to heal because you're going to take like Arcan or a Bone Shaper or a Catacross maybe to be able to heal him up. So it's going to be quite hard to deal with. Again, in Petrified Elite, he's rerunning ones to save in the combat phase. And then the other thing I like about the Gothizzar Harvester is that if the enemy decides just to try and take him out with their shooting, that's absolutely fine. Sure, it's annoying, lost the Gothizzar Harvester, but it means like your Mortek Guard units that are vulnerable to enemy shooting are protected because the enemy's focusing fire on this guy. And that's something I found in my experience as well. But going on to his main ability, which I can't put off any longer because it's very important, it's going to be Bone Harvest. So roll a dice each time a model is slain within 3 inches of this model. On a 4+, you can pick one friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper unit within 6 inches of this model. If you do so and the slain model had a wound characteristic of 4 or less, you can heal 1 wound allocated to that unit. If the slain model had a wound characteristic of 5 to 9, you can heal up to D3 wounds allocated to that unit. Or if the slain model had a wound characteristic of 10 or more, you can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to that unit. If there are no wounds allocated to that unit you pick, you can return a number of slain models to that unit with a combined wound characteristic equal to that or less than the number of wounds you could have healed. So this is something we see a lot, grave sites, all these sort of things, how, like the number of wounds you're healing back to the unit, you can return those amount of models back, etc. We've seen that sort of thing before. However, where this works really well, it's like I said, with those Mortek Guard, because you're going to get your most bang for your buck. You could run this guy with, Necropolis Stalkers, or you could run this guy with Kavalos Death Riders. I'm just trying to think of examples. But because they are 4 wounds or less, you're only going to be healing that 1 wound back, which really, when you consider them putting this guy next to Mortek Guard, you get more, for your buck on that point, because your Mortek Guard are going to be dying more. So, for example, we just compared to taking this guy with Necropolis Stalkers. When 1 Stalker dies, you can heal 1 wound back. However, 1 Stalker's worth 4 wounds, right? So if you looked at in Mortek Guard terms, that means 4 models have died, so you can potentially heal 4 models back. And again, you have to roll dice, it's on a 4 up and everything else, but it means 50% of them are going through. Also, not just friendly models that die, any models that die that are within 3 inches of this guy. I know 3 inches doesn't sound like a big range, and to be honest, sometimes I do want to take more than 1 of them, because I've only ever taken 1, and I do think maybe taking 2 or maybe 3, or just go mad, take 4, something like that. But the base of this guy is a fairly decent size, so you can try and capture as many models that die near him. And if you're thinking, right, well, what about if I do what you say? So I've got, let's just say, 2 units of 40 Mortek Guard. Let's just say. You've got them stretched out, and then you've got this guy in the middle. And then the enemy just goes, right, I'm just going to attack, the flanks of those Mortek Guard units and not get near the Gothizzar Harvester, because they don't want to be hit by him. And they don't want to make their models, when they die, help you at healing more models back. It's definitely something I can see what they could do against it, but what that means is when they attack those Mortek Guard units, you just kill the Mortek Guard who are next to the Gothizzar Harvester, as you'll be able to choose where to take the casualties from. And considering your Mortek Guard are very good in combat in terms of, rerun all failed save rolls, everything like that, it's just made them even harder to get rid of. So the Gothizzar Harvester definitely is a place like that. And then again, answering the question, should I take one if I'm taking, Kavalos Death Riders and, Necropolis Stalkers and Mortis Guard, etc.? No, honestly, it's not really worth it. You could use them as a sledgehammer, but it's 200 points that you're better off taking something else, to be honest. But where they work really well is, like I said, in the list as well that I took with the 2 units of 40, it was also Crematorian, so when my guys died, it did damage to the enemy, and then they came back, and then when they died again, it was more damage to the enemy. It was a really, really nice castle build, and something I definitely want to play again sometime. And that's my experience with my Gothizzar Harvester. If you've got experience with Gothizzar Harvester as well, and I don't know, let's say you take quite a few in your list, please make sure you put that down below, as it would be interesting to hear and get your experiences. I know not just for me, but other people watching this video will definitely appreciate that. And, this guy, like I said, pretty goddamn offensive in combat for something you think is just purely supportive, because, you could take a Liege, give him an extra attack, and you could go, if you went more Centaurians, you would lose the extra -1 Rend from Petra Elite. It's probably not worth it, but you could get, re-rolls to wound from Arch, Kavalos, Xanatos and stuff. So there's quite a few things you can do with this guy, and I think 200 points is pretty a good bargain. I don't think he's too expensive for what he does. But anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. And then moving on to the Mortek Crawler, so the artillery piece for the Ossiarch Bonereapers. This arcane catapult, known as the Mortek Crawler, delivers death from afar with terrifying accuracy. Crewed by 4 Ossiarch created from master artilleries, it can fire hails of necrotic skulls that bite and gnaw, send souls tearing spirits into the foes, or hurl weighty blocks graven with curse that can kill the mighty in an instant. The Mortek Crawler is a creation of determined genius, devised by Catacross himself. It is an extremely efficient design, for it is as much a creature as it is a machine. The original diagrams still have pride of place on the scroll-covered walls of the Mortarch's Chamber of Contemplation to this day. For more than a simple catapult, the Mortek Crawler is a self-powered artillery device that has its own aggressive sense of being. It can reload and fire its arcane payload in a matter of seconds. It is born to war upon a dozen of skeletal legs, rippling like those of a centipede as it slowly carries its bulk to war amongst the Ossiarch legions. Unlike conventional artillery, it can fire on the move without a lack of accuracy, making it the perfect tool to support a cohort on a long march of eternal conquest. So that is a bit of lore for the Mortek Crawler in Age of Sigmar. So yes, it is basically half monster, half artillery. That's why it is a behemoth and an artillery piece when it comes to army construction. So you can only have 4 of these in your list, which obviously if you want to take some Gothizzar Harvesters, you're going to have to make some choices. Now, I do want to firstly talk about the sort of the feeling people have to Mortek Crawlers, and that's because they are very good, sometimes obnoxiously good, but they do have a weakness, and we will explain that when we get into its war score, which we're going to go through now. But what I will say is because it has got a weakness, and it's mainly because every Ossiarch Bonereaper army has at least 1, probably more like 2 in their list, and I would say, don't take 4 of these things because, number 1, 4 of these things, 800 points. I'm not saying that's, they're too expensive. They're not too expensive for points. But that's a big part of your army. That's nearly half of your army on your shooting potential, which has a weakness. And that means that you're going to struggle when you need to take rid of those enemy units that are going to exploit that weakness. But anyway, we'll go on with it. So it's a single model, obviously, and it's going to cost you 200 points. So again, same points as a Gothizzar Harvester and many other things in your army around that sort of mark. So, looking at its description, a Mortek Crawler is a single model armed with a Dread Catapult. It's got a 4-inch movement, a 4+ save, a bravery 10 and 12 wounds, so it's pretty goddamn chunky and survivable. And then when we go on to its missile weapons, essentially it's got 2 special shots, which it can do 1 of each special shot once per game. And then it's got its generic shot, which we'll read now, which has got a 6 to 36 inch range, 3 attacks, 2 to hit, 3 to wound, no rend, and is 5 damage, but the damage gets less the more damage this guy takes. So bear in mind, if you're fielding Mortek Crawlers and you're doing your shooting, you're half through your game, but you've taken some damage, do remember to look at the damage table because it can be quite easy to forget. And you go, oh, that's, 10 damage, because the enemy failed 2 saves, and actually it really was only 6. So make sure you keep on top of that, guys. But what I want to mention here, because all the ranges are the same, they're all 6 to 36, so that means that really you have a range of 40, because this thing moves 4 inches, but then you have the Ossiarch Command ability, don't you, from the Allegiance abilities that we've already read through and talked about, that can give you plus 3 inches to your move. That's not instead of a run, that's not a charge or anything like that, so that allows you to move the extra 3 inches, which means your threat range goes from when you read it and it says 36 to actually 43 inches at most, because you can plus that 7 inch of movement onto that to just move in the direction of something you want to shoot. Now, I will also say that this unit does need line of sight to shoot. Don't think it's a catapult, so that means it does need line of sight, like some catapults out there. I think the Clan Pestilence, Plague Claw catapults don't need line of sight. This guy does. I think that's fine. I think it needs line of sight. The thing's fucking tall enough anyway to be able to see what it wants. But also, this thing's already really, really powerful. If it didn't need line of sight, everything else, it's getting on the teetering broken section. So then going on to the 2 special shots, which we're going to read in a second just because I want to do the generic stats. So we'll do the melee weapon, so the Crawler tools, so 1 inch range, 6 attacks, 3s and 4s, no red, 1 damage. So from the tools of the people who are working on the catapult, like the crew tools, that's really good. Usually they're just like 5s and 5s and maybe at most 5 attacks. So that's really good. And just to say, with the crew, it says, this model has a crew of Mortek engineers that attack with the Crawler's tools. For all purposes, the crew are treated in the same manner as a mount, just in case there was an artifact or command trait or some sort of ability out there that doesn't affect mounts. The crew will not be affected by it. But I can tell you, when I've been in Petra Elite and I've had 2 of these in my list, and then the enemy gets into combat with me, what I can do is I can give them the extra -1 rend if they're in range of a hero and everything else with that command ability from Petra Elite. And then suddenly you've got 6 attacks that are 3s and 4s, -1 rend, 1 damage. Which I know is not like incredible. But that's pretty damn good from, you know, the tools of some crew. So not a bad melee attack there. And the other thing to say is because it's got a 6 to 36 inch range, what does this mean? This means that it cannot shoot an enemy unit if it is within 6 inches of itself. So what that means is if the enemy gets a Mortek Crawler in combat, so if an enemy gets within 3 inches of a Mortek Crawler, that Mortek Crawler would have to attack that enemy unit. So let's just say an example I've had where I've got a Mortek Crawler and then I've had some Dracoths and Living City coming from the board edge. They shoot, then they move, and then they charge a Mortek Crawler. They don't kill the Mortek Crawler, but in my turn, when it is my time to attack with the Mortek Crawler to shoot with it, I'm in combat with those Dracoths, which means I have to shoot that unit that I'm in combat with, and I can't because they are within 6 inches of me. And then that is how you shut down a Mortek Crawler. So what I do want to say is Mortek Crawlers are like really, really powerful. Everything else, I know a lot of people have got some bad experience with them, and they can be obnoxious, like I said, to some certain degrees. Like I played Arcane Places of Power, and I played against someone who only had, I think, like 3 small heroes assigned to try and catch the objectives, and the Mortek Crawlers just took out the heroes, like within the first 2 turns. So yeah, I do get it. They can be like quite a negative play experience against certain armies, but I think for most armies, there's a way around it. You get this thing in combat, it shuts it down. It can't shoot. Also doesn't have any rend, so that means if you're going against an army with good armor saves, anything from just like a 4-up save re-rolling, anything from that better onwards, it's really hard to get the damage through. So I don't think they're as bad as people like to make out, but I do understand that they can be very powerful. It's what I'm trying to say. So then going on to the abilities, we have the Dread Catapult. So before shooting with a Dread Catapult, which basically means a Mortek Crawler, choose either the Necrotic Skulls, the Cauldron of Torment, or the Cursed Stele. Weapon characteristics for that attack. Each Dread Catapult can only make 1 Cauldron of Torment and 1 Cursed Stele attack per battle. So that's what I was saying, the 2 special attacks from earlier, and they're the ones you can see obviously clearly on its war scroll. It says the Cauldron of Torment, so this one, do not use the attack sequence for an attack made with a Cauldron of Torment. Instead, pick 1 enemy unit that is in range of the attack and roll 1 dice for each model in that target unit and add the modifier for the Cauldron of Torment shown on the damage table to each roll. If the result is equal or greater than the unmodified bravery characteristic of that target unit, 1 model from that unit is slain. So to start with, you are not taking any basically minuses. When it says a look at the chart, it doesn't actually give you any bonuses. It's just saying you just roll that dice, try to beat their bravery or get equal to it, which basically is a 1d6. And the more damage the catapult takes, it can even go down to -2 right at the end. So then the bravery would have to be like a 4. Basically, this is all right against some really bad bravery units that are also hordes. Personally, never use the Cauldron of Torment because it's really not what this thing's worth for. Because at the end of the day, you can't shoot with your normal 5 damage attacks, which are, you get 3 attacks of that before you give a Mortek Crawler an extra attack from a Liege Cavios, etc. That could be 4 attacks from the Liege Cavios, and each one of them doing 5 damage. Instead, you give it the Cauldron of Torment. Not worth it. Waste of time unless you're going against something really specific and with shit bravery. Because bear in mind, you may go, oh, more Saurians makes the enemy -1 bravery. Take the Bone Tithe Shrieker, the ender spell for the Ossiarch Bonereapers to make the enemy another -1 bravery. You're going to make the enemy another -1 bravery from something else as well. And you go, oh, that's -3 bravery to the enemy as an example. Yeah, it's unmodified. So none of that matters. But what also is something important to point out in case you do the Cauldron of Torment. If the enemy goes, yeah, I'm bravery, I don't know, 5, but because I've got 30 in a unit, I get the extra +3 for having 3 lots of 10 in that unit from, like basically the Mass Legion helping bravery battle shock mechanic. Can't remember what it's called. But anyway, so you go, I've got +3, my banner gives me +1, so actually I've got +4, so I'm bravery 9. Bollocks. That won't matter for this because this is unmodified bravery characteristic. So then going on to the next one, which is the other reason why this thing can be pretty obnoxious, is because it's the Cursed Steely. So do not use the attack sequence for an attack made with a Cursed Steely. Instead, pick one enemy model that is in range of the attack and roll 2d6. Add the modifier for the Cursed Steely shown on the damage table above to the roll. If the result is equal to or greater than the wound characteristic of that target, it is slain. So, of course, you can look at this as sniping out enemy heroes, getting rid of, chunky models that are like 3 wounds or something in a unit if you want to. But where this is really, like I said, the obnoxious bit comes from, is because you can break enemy coherency with it. And currently at the game age Sigmar, if you are not in coherency, so if your unit is not in coherency with itself, so that means that basically if at least one model from your unit isn't within 1 inch of another model from your unit that isn't within 1 inch of another model, basically if you have all your models in a straight line, they need to at least be within 1 inch of each other. And what tends to happen is people stretch out their units, and then you fire the catapult, you do the Cursed Steely, you pick one model in the middle of the unit, so then the unit is now kind of split into 2 because there is a gap, and then you say to your opponent which half of the unit do you want to die. So what I would say to that, if you're using that in a sort of like a more friendly non-tournament setting, and you wipe out half of your body's unit because he just forgot or he didn't even know the Cursed Steely exists and he deployed like that, you went, right, I'm going first, I'm deleting half your unit. You're going to lose friends at the end of the day because basically you're being a dick. However, if you're in a tournament setting, I think that's fine. You can do things like that because it's a very competitive setting you're in, and you have to use your rules to the best of your advantage. But what I would say is that just let your opponent know that you've got this ability, because then it's not so much of a, oh, I got you, feel bad moment of wiping out half their unit, which can really devastate their game plan and can almost just change the tide of the battle completely in that mechanic. Especially if you take 2 or 3 Mortek Crawlers, that means that you can just remove 2 or 3 models, especially if it's a unit that only has like 2 wounds each or like 1 wound each, models, you're going to get it off, aren't you, pretty much at the end of the day. Something I will say though is when you do this roll to start with, you have to -3 from your dice roll, so it's not guaranteed. However, if the enemy starts attacking you, the more damage you take, and it says a designer's note here, it says the chance of slaying the target of a Cursed Steely increases as the attacking model suffers damage. So when your Mortek Crawler suffers more damage, as you can see on the damage table, when it takes 8 to 9 wounds, you get +1 to it, and when it takes 10+ wounds, it gets +3 to the roll. So if the enemy keeps on sprinkling in attacks of this thing, and you just go, poor, well, I've taken 10 wounds, so now my necrotic skulls are only doing 1 damage each, that's when you use the Cursed Steely, that's when you save from. If I'm taking like 2 of these things, I'll be honest, never always used the Cursed Steely, and that's also in a tournament setting, I never always used it. And if I did, if I got 2 catapults, I may use one quite quickly just to try, and if I see an opportunity to, like I say, in a tournament setting, wipe out half an enemy unit or something. But I'd like to keep the other one in reserve for when it takes damage to hopefully still be able to shoot because it's not unlocked in combat, something like that, and then go for that +3 to the roll. That really, really does help. And what I would say as well is, again, it's a rule. Why shouldn't you be able to use it in friendly games? I'm not saying you can't, but if you do, let your opponent know you can do this. And in particular, if it's a friendly game and you see your opponent, move nothing else, again, be nice and say, I have got this ability to be able to wipe out half a unit. And your opponent might go, oh, but I have to have my unit in this formation to hold this objective for this one more turn to try and get the extra, 2 victory points or whatever. But then I know if you win priority, you could shoot my unit with your catapults and break coherency. And your opponent might go, that's the risk they're willing to take. Then that's fair enough. But you don't want to catch them out, especially with something go, oh, right, yeah, so that's just half the unit gone, isn't it? It's, like a half a unit of fucking, if you got a unit of 9 eels or something like that, and then this thing just manages to, again, 4 wounds, so not the easiest thing to get rid of. But suddenly, before he knows it, they had a unit of 9, and now they have to pick, 4 to die, pretty much. So, yeah. Definitely make sure your opponent is aware that you have these capabilities. But if you're in a tournament, and especially if you're on the top tables, you know, it's all cutthroat business. But that's how this thing can be seen as being really, really strong, really, really powerful. I think there's better shooting out there. I think I've heard people go like, oh, I wish the Mortek Crawler had rend. Absolutely not. If this thing had rend, there wouldn't even be a question if it's broken. It would just be fucking straight overpowered and broken as shit if this thing had rend and didn't need line of sight. So, and also, if it didn't have a minimum range as well. Because I think this thing, you know, it needs line of sight. It's got a minimum range, and it doesn't have rend. It's 3 weaknesses there. So rather than just going, it's unstoppable, I've had it plenty of times. And to be honest, rather than just talking about from an opponent's side going, no, trying to make them not feel so bad about the Mortek Crawler they're going to face, what I would say for you guys as well who wants to take a Mortek Crawler, sometimes when I build a list, I try not to take a Mortek Crawler, but they're just so useful for getting rid of enemy like synergy heroes at the back. They're only 5 wounds, something like that. Really, really useful stuff. And so you kind of always feel like you need to take one. I want to try out a list for Static Lords, where basically I've got a lot of Necropolis Stalkers, as fast moving, damage dealing, you know, like multi-small units of them, rather than taking a Mortek Crawler. And I want to see how that does. But I would always say, you know, especially if you're new to Ossiarch Bonereapers and you like the model as well, take a Mortek Crawler, because it's going to help you out. And also, if you've only got one, and the enemy's like, oh, they're going to have to deal with that, that's fine. The amount of effort they probably put in to try and get rid of the Mortek Crawler, it's probably more than 200 points anyway they're putting into it, or they're having to deploy their like one deep striking unit to try and get to it, you know, to keep it occupied for a turn or two. You know, you're going to have to make your opponent have to start thinking, because when you deploy these things in the middle of the board, when your opponent goes, what's the range? And you go, I've got a potential threat range of 43 inches. Then your opponent either does one or two things, which, number one, they go, oh, fuck, and then they really spread out their army to try and be out of range of you. I don't know why, because that's such a big range. So then you've got option 2, what they do, and this is what I do if I'm against enemy shooting that's got a ridiculously long range. I go, right, okay, that's your range. Nothing I can do about that unless basically I don't play the game. So I'm just going to have to suck it up and not let it affect my deployment as much. And you'll find that your opponent will make mistakes in deployment and stuff with the Mortek Crawler. So it's definitely useful. What I'd also say with the Mortek Crawler as well is, you look at it, you got 3 attacks. Like I said, I've turned that to 4 because you're going to take a Leech Cavios at least, or you're going to take Catacross or something like that. And what I do is make it 4 attacks. I put the Soul Guide spell on them for the Mortis and Soul Mason. So you're hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Wounded on 3s. Again, if you're Mortis Praetorians, which I think Mortek Crawlers do the best in, because you can take Arch Cavalos Xantos to get re-roll 1s to wound, or re-roll all failed wound rolls, depending on what you're fighting. You can have hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounded on 3s, re-rolling all failed wound rolls, potentially. No rend and 5 damage. And when I've taken it and I've had 4 attacks, generally hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounded on 3s, not re-rolling because I'm not Mortis Praetorians, and no rend and 5 damage, I'll literally roll my attacks. I'll get, I don't know, out of my 4 hits, I'll get 2 4s and like, I don't know, 2 1s. Re-roll those 1s, get another 1. So I've got 3 wounds to roll. And then I roll 3 2s. And then it does nothing. And then you just think, this thing that people are complaining about, and it absolutely did nothing. And then the next turn, it will do just fucking 15 damage. And then it's just like, right, it's just wiped out an enemy unit. So you'll really find these things are hit and miss. So what I'm trying to say is, when you look at the attack characteristics of 2 and 3, you can't rely on it all the time, and that's why I kind of always take a second one as well. But you'll find it will do nothing, or you will feel really bad for your opponent, like, because it will just wipe something out. All I'd say is, don't split fire with these attacks, even if you're making 4 or something, because you can't guarantee it's going to go through. And but the really nice thing is, because you're already hitting on 2s, if the enemy's got, you know, look out sir, and then like another -1 to hit from something else, and then -2 to hit, you're still hitting on 4s, which, you know, isn't too bad considering you started on hitting on 2s. And your Bone Tithe Shrieker is going to give you +1 to hit, because it's not just for combat as well, that endless spell. So yeah, I really do like it. And like I say, Mortis Praetorian is probably the best way. Take Mortek Crawlers, and yeah, it can be pretty. Like I say, I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's strong, but it's not as far as being overpowered. And that's talking to someone who, yeah, I run them, so it's like, you know, that's a bit of a hypocrite thing to say. However, what I will say, well, not hypocrite, but like a biased thing to say. But as someone who has been playing with Death now since the start of Age of Sigmar, and Mortek Crawlers, I still see them as pretty new. You know, that's like the first proper shooting unit we got for Death. And I spent the previous 5 years going against everyone else's fucking shooting, and it was fucking shit. And now finally I've got some payback. So I personally don't have a problem with it, and I think it's long overdue. But yeah, shooting definitely massively helps. And at the moment as well, in the meta, it's very heavy on shooting or some sort of range damage capabilities, you know, like fire spells and all that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of enemy support characters, fucking skink priests and shit like that. So you need to have Mortek Crawler to fucking crush them. If you're playing Skaven, also go and zap or warp lightning cannon. It's a great way to take out a skink priest, as I have found out as well. But anyway, guys, so with that, as we mentioned Skaven now, I think that probably means that we're coming to the end of this video. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have so, please smash the shit out of that like button, the subscribe button and the bell notification. Really helps out the channel, and it's absolutely free, which is great. By pressing the like button, it shows me that you enjoy this sort of content, and there's more chance I'll make more of it. And particularly in this video, obviously it's Ossiarch Bonereapers, and it lets YouTube know that people are enjoying this content, so hopefully it'll make it easier for other people to watch it on YouTube. Also, by clicking the subscribe button is ultimately how this channel grows, and by pressing the bell notification, it means that you'll never miss a future video of mine. Particularly how we're still talking about the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and we still have, like, I believe at least 2 or 3 more videos of Ossiarch Bonereapers to go as part of this long, in-depth series. Like, this video has gone for 40 minutes, and we talked about 2 war scrolls. So you can tell how long and in-depth this video series is for these armies that I do. And what I'd also like to say is, if there's anyone else you think who would enjoy this, make sure you share it with them. And if you would like to join the conversation, make sure you join the Age of Nagash Discord, where you'll find a link to it in the description below. And also, if you've got any questions, Ossiarch Bonereapers is an army that I do play, so I'm quite experienced and knowledgeable with it. I would try and help you down below. And if there's anything you've disagreed with what I said as well, let me know down below as well, and it'd be interesting to have a conversation with you. And what I'd also like to say is, if you would like to support the channel, please click the join button next to the subscribe button. Basically, it'll take you to become an Age of Nagash member, where you can give anything from £1 a month, and that goes straight towards keeping the channel going. And if you would like to become a patron, you'll find a link to my Patreon on top of the description down below, where it'll take you to my Patreon site, and you can give anything from $1 a month. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go through the list of, like I did at the start, of the patrons and YouTube members who, because of them, I can make this content for you guys on YouTube. Because like I always say, guys, you know, YouTube, and even with the money from Patreon or anything like that, it doesn't nearly give as much money like to make this profitable, or even cover the cost of how much time and effort and money I put into running YouTube. But what it does show me is enough people really passionately enjoy the channel enough for me to be able to justify keeping this up. And really, for these people who do help keep the channel up, I'm lost for words, and I don't really know how to thank them enough. But the least I can do is give them a shout out in all my videos. And if you would like to become one of these beautiful people, smash that join button and the link to my Patreon down below, and I will be really, really appreciative. But for the people who have already made that great decision, it's going to be my Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragon, which is going to be Stuart F and Filq. So you two guys, you know you're the top supporters. I really don't know how to thank you guys enough, but thank you so much for that really strong support you're giving the channel, and it really will help to keep the channel going, and thank you so much for it. And then we've got my Morgasts, which is Bleed Red, who's been a Morgast, like I say, a while now, so thank you so much for your continued support of that tier. It really does help the channel as well. And then my Vampires, who some of these people have been supporting me for a very long time. So we've got Mir, Martin S, Rouse321, David A, Ronni H, SpareBear, Christopher H, Northdrop and Nathan F. Thank you so much for your continued support, guys. It really does go a long way to keeping the channel going. And then my Necromancers, which is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, WolfNick, Michal W, Quad, Cranky Wombat, Christopher C, Christopher F, James S, Robin S, Steve T, James T, Patrick F, and JJ. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Like I said, wouldn't be able to do it without any of you guys. If anyone would like to become, well, like I say, one of these amazing people, click the join button or the link to my Patreon down below. But if you can't do that, absolutely no worries. All I ask, if you did enjoy the video, do me a massive favour, press the like button, the subscribe button, bell notification button as well. And what I'd like to add to that, as I know a lot of you guys have been doing that lately, and it hasn't gone unnoticed, and I really, really do appreciate that. So guys, above anything else, I'm just really glad that you came and watched this video here today. I hope I've managed to help you with maybe your thoughts on, should I include a Harvester, should I include a Mortek Crawler? They're both the same points. What's the purpose? You're using the Harvester as a bit of basically a support piece to help the rest of your army out, where the Catapult does do that to an extent, but it does it to basically be a scalpel of taking out enemy synergy, trying to muck up enemy lines by removing coherency models from units, everything else. So guys, with that, I'm going to thank you again very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, like I say. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember until next time to stay safe, stay hygienic, wear a mask, and for God's sake wash your hands. So by the time we can actually start playing games again, maybe you'll have your Mortek Crawler and your Harvester ready to smash those enemy units. And then more importantly, until next time, remember that Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.